your glass up high. Turn it up, it's time. Dog boy on the line. Everything will last. Raise your...
Welcome back to episode 282 of the Tallboy Radio podcast. And as we always say, who knows where it goes when the beer flows? Well, the beer is a-flowing tonight. And have we got a treat for you? No. We've got a treat for us, haven't we, Gazza?
We have, even in the world. We've got an absolute belter of an episode for you tonight, guys. Absolute. The treat is on us, as they say. And we're going to be talking about one of our favourite topics.
Beer.
It's great to have a guest on with us tonight. And without giving too much away, maybe they have something to do with the beer that we're drinking, but that will all be revealed shortly. So I think without further ado, we get our guest on.
Absolutely. Tim, would you like to say hello and tell us a little bit about why you've so kindly joined us tonight?
Good evening to both of you. Tonight we just sent you a few beers to try out, and so I don't think I've got quite as many as you have, but hopefully I'll be in a better state when we all finish later. But we'll hopefully try a few nice beers.
Oh yes, most definitely. So yeah, you were kind enough to send us, rather than sell us. We very generously send us some beers which you produced down on your farm, didn't you? Did you want to tell us a little bit about how that started? And then we'll get on to the first beer that we're drinking that the folks who are watching on YouTube will be able to see.
So I'm sort of originally a farmer in Worcestershire, Bromsgrove in Worcestershire. I've always liked my beers, so about sort of 6 years ago, started home brewing, and it's sort of grown from there. So we thought we've got sort of most of 9 sort of core bottled beers that, and then we have a few sort of guest ones out as seasonal. So we thought it'd be an interesting idea to send some bottles out to various bloggers and podcasters and see what feedback we get. And we've had obviously quite an amazing feedback from everybody.
I know it's been fantastic. I've been watching it quite keenly unfold on Instagram and the different bits of social media and on YouTube. And in fact, we had a chap on also called Tim a couple of weeks ago now. And he is a beer brander, and he was familiar with your good self as well. And he was waxing lyrical about how good your beers are.
Is that Tim Weaver?
That's the one?
Yeah. So yeah, he didn't know whether or not it was genius or madness. So we're gonna have a chat in about a month's time, and sort of get to the bottom of it to say whether or not it's definitely sort of the. It's introduced our brand to a lot of people, so we just got to sort of keep pushing it and keep promoting it. So,
absolutely. So the first beer that myself and Gaz are drinking tonight is one called Greenfields Gold. Did you want to tell us a little bit about that while myself and Gaz enjoy it? Because I'll tell you what,
it's probably one of our sort of original core 4. So I've always liked American hops. But I also feel to have a sessionable beer that's not overly hopped is important, and feel that I can have more than 1 or 2 without getting that feeling that you don't want anymore. My type of beer is you remain thirsty as you're drinking them. So we've tried to make it as hoppy, but as not overly hoppy for a 3.8% beer. So it's more of a challenge. You can sort of, with your 5% beers, you can throw more hops in there and get more flavors out. But we wanted a balanced beer, and it's won a few awards with SIBA. It was our first award with SIBA, so and it's repeatedly won awards with them at the annual beer competition in Ludlow. So yeah, it's gone down well.
Well, it's going well, quite down well here as well, I should add as well. So in terms of your core beer range then, do you want to talk us through a little bit the main beers, and just out of interest, let us know what your best seller is?
So the gold is probably one of our original ones. We then slightly tweaked it. I like mosaic hops, So, and as things do happen here, they happen a bit by either accident or not necessarily design. So we either couldn't get some hops, and so we'd got some others. And so Greenfields Gold is our original. Say it's got sort of what has it got in it? It's got Cascade and Chinook, a bit of Amarillo in there. So and then Grazing Girls is our sort of probably fruitier, slightly sweeter, not as malty. Still 4.5%. So that sort of they're all that sort of percentage. A bit sweeter. So it's more my pale end of the scale, which I do prefer. I love Citra, Oakamale Citra, so we sort of made our equivalent to one of those hop on, which is mainly all, so it's dry hop with Citra, a bit drier than Citra's, the Oakamale Citra, but that's one of them, again, another one of my sort of favourites. And then we brought in Spring Meadow, which again we didn't want. There were a number of people, even though I don't feel our beers are too hoppy, were saying that they didn't want a hoppy beer. So we brought that out, and we've just recently brewed that as gluten free, and they're all vegan friendly anyway. But so we've done a gluten free, and our hop on is going to be gluten free as well.
Cool. So when you say sort of vegan friendly, then is that important to your customers, or is it just a matter that you're not using sort of the fish guts and what have you in the fining
Well,
process?
it's a swim bladder. That's the, and everybody says fish guts, which doesn't sound very nice. I mean, I don't know if swim bladder's any nicer, but it's probably it's a protein, and then whether or not it's negatively charged or positively charged, so it just attracts the larger particles. And like a lot of things we probably eat with, I love my wine gums, but if you knew what they were made of, then you
Yeah.
probably wouldn't eat too as many as I do. So I think it felt important at the time. We tried, we use adjunct finings, and the results we were getting, our beer becomes crystal clear very quickly. So there was no real need to go down the finings route. So that's we stuck at it, and then a number of people were asking gluten free, and so we've just started bringing that range in as well.
Cool. What do you make of it anyway, Gazza?
I really like it. I say it's quite light. I think it's quite refreshing. It's very easily drinkable. I think, as you said to me, I think you could probably quite easily have a night of drinking a number of these and not necessarily feel full or bloated, or I can only have a couple of them because it's particularly strong. But no, I really enjoy it. I quite like a sort of hoppy ale type sort of beer. I'm in hazy. I drink quite a lot of, so I am looking forward if we have one. I don't know if they have one or not. But that hazy blue pale ale has just sort of caught my eye. And just looking down your list, I was like, "Oh, that definitely is right up my street," sort of thing. But no, this
one
very,
is
very thoughtful.
again is again for me Idaho hops, which is sort of got that passion fruity feel, still Citra in there.
Yeah.
But for us, it's 5%, so it's not. It's not. Some people would call it session ale, but I think you need to be in the mid fours. So it's a treat to have that one rather than sort of to have a couple.
Just going back to the hop on, did you say the Oakamore Citra one is a cracking beer? And I've drunk, I've drunk that before. I think we had that. We have a local beer and gin festival, and they had that on, and I tried a couple. I was like, oh, that's really tasty. So again, if that hop on is sort of similar to that, then that sounds like a belter as well.
Let's find out.
Yeah.
Okay, let's find out. Let's do it, dude. Are you going for that one next then?
It's probably a good to follow on. You don't really want to go to the hazy or the BDA straight in. You want to leave that towards the end. So I think the stronger flavors do sort of disguise some of this more subtle flavors.
So one of the things I've read on I think it was on your website and on the blurb that you kindly sent out as well, which is a very good bit of blurb as well. I'll hold that up to the camera there for folks to see. It's a very nicely presented piece of paper with a lot of information on it. is the phrase you're using. It's a good phrase, accessible ABVs. And I think, what you're talking about there, the 4 to 5%, that is that sort of accessible range, isn't it?
Yeah, we've just done a summer one that's 3.4 that we might put it in a can. We're not entirely sure yet. It's going in the cask this week, so that will go for. That will just be a seasonal. I'm not saying I don't drink 7-8% beers, but I know for sure I'm not going to have many of them.
No.
No. Have you got any plans to do anything like of that strength, or are you going to keep it all within this sort of range?
We have over the years. We've done some collabs with a couple of Americans. So we've done 6%, and the one, unfortunately, it should have been a brilliant brew, but it just got hop burn. We've put so many hops in it, and the control when we were brewing, we were very, very careful not to put the hops in at a low temperature, but we just overdid it, and it just didn't work. After about a year or 18 months, it became drinkable, but it was out of date by then, so the hop burn had disappeared. But it was like, yeah, it was like having a trilly juice. It was so we're not probably the most adventurous brewery as new brews go at. We bring it maybe 1 or 2 a year in, but we keep our sort of core range going. So as we're I suppose we know then we can supply our regulars with our core range rather than bringing in 11, 12, 13 beers and then saying which one you're going to get rid of, because they all become your favorites a bit. So you can't then decide which one they're going to go. So it's nice to bring them back in every now and again.
Well, I've got to tell you, this one is right up my alley. It's a nice hoppy beer, and I do love a hoppy beer. I've done a couple of brewery tours, and whenever they send the hops around for you to have a little sniff and a handful of, I'm tempted just to snort it like a pig and get involved with it, because I just love the smell and taste of them.
That's
Again,
really
yeah. It's I think there are hoppier citrusy beers out there, but I felt that we didn't if we were going to keep it at that sort of mid-4s, then we weren't going to go too mad. And we have tried to put more hops in, and we felt it sort of detracted from it a bit. So we do dry hop, but now we actually put a lot of hops in at the end of the boil, and then put another half of the amount in at dry hopping stage.
Wow, lovely. This is a very, very enjoyable beer.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, really, really, really tasty. Just a question in terms of the process now. Are you tempted to sort of try significant different flavors? Because obviously lots of people they try lots of different ingredients. So I suppose you've got your core staple sort of 3 or 4 beers that you said. How tempted are you to be quite inventive, or is it a case of tried and tested and we know what we're doing and away we go?
Yeah, we've just we've just brought a summer breeze out, and it's a hop. I'm not even sure if it's Strava or Strum. I don't do the brewing day to day now. So one of the suppliers sort of said, gave us some hops and said, try these, and it's turned out to be. Years ago we did a what was it? It was Puddles. We called it, the sort of bit very piney, and to me it was that sort of gorgeous 3%, real sort of piney, not too hoppy, but it was sort of say a beautiful drink, summery drink. And because we'd got so many others, we didn't brew it anymore. So we've just brought this new one out, which is very equivalent to that, so similar to that.
Right. Yeah.
Sure. Look forward
And
to
then
trying.
we have done in the past. We've done we did a black rye IPA and a red IPA from the sort of chap who he's a deaf brewer that comes over. I mean, he has been coming over every year, but this year he's not. He's sort of I think he's saving his money and going fishing more. So
right.
But he's had some really interesting beers we've gone from him.
Well, I do like those piney beers. So just to ask you then further questions then about your farm, and I was reading a little bit about your sustainability as well. So in terms of the hops and the spent hops, or the spoilt hops, and then the grain that's been used, what do you do with that then once it's been through the brewing process? Or
So all of the grain is fed to our sort of our Highland cows. So if you look at our Instagram post, you can see them munching away after every brew. And then our hops, it just goes onto the muck heap. You can't feed hop, so we just mulch them down. So everything goes either back into the land one way, either through the cow or through the muck heap.
and they are, if you do visit their Instagram page, and we'll make sure that they get put in the show notes for this episode. They are some fantastic looking creatures. Do they take some looking after?
They are relatively, considering how everybody thinks with the horns, they are very easy to look after. The only thing that they don't like is being inside. So over the winter, just to conserve our ground, we bring them into a barn, and that's for sort of probably 4 or 5 months. And because they don't like being in close proximity to each other, so they'll give each other a bit of a nudge, and and it's just the hierarchy of the herd, but it never stops. It just keeps on going. So, but they're almost they're if you imagine seeing elephants in Africa, what the herd instinct they have with the calves, they're very similar to that. Now, I've never seen a cow being called the equivalent of an elephant, but they're very protective, and they do look after each other. So they're quite an unusual animal.
No, they're beautiful looking creatures, aren't they?
Yeah, and it's strange because, as I say, there's a particular, not stigma as such, but people go, oh no, but you can actually see, they can be quite aesthetic, I suppose, and when you look at it and you go I say we do various museums and galleries and this, that, and the other, and you always see photos or paintings of them. And you're like, I wonder why they choose them. I don't know why.
I think every picture at the moment seems to be of a Highland cow of varying colour. So I think it seems to be the fashion.
Dare we ask what you breed them for? After saying how beautiful they are.
Sorry, I lost you then.
Dare we ask what you breed them for after saying how beautiful they are?
Well, yeah, unfortunately, we've had them a relatively short amount of time, so they've all been kept nicely. They haven't gone anywhere you have to worry about. We've very fortunate. So the Malverns we sent a number of places, but more recently they've been either going to people with either a calf, or they've got a bit of land and they want to bring in a tourist attraction. So there's a local farm that they do Highland cow safaris, and so you can jump in the trailer and they'll take you around the field. Some have gone up to the Malverns. Some, they just vary. So at the moment, there's enough people want them as a hobby that I can sell them to people without worrying about
about anything else.
They're not going to end up somewhere that you don't want them to.
No.
Sleep well, children. That's not what we're telling you.
Yeah.
Well, no, fabulous. So farming at the moment, we spoke a little bit at the start. Now you described yourself as it was a hobby farmist.
Yeah, we used to have 1,000 sheep and 100 acres of arable land. After foot and mouth, we've got cold on the animal welfare. So that's 2001. We stopped farming, and then hence I got a bit more time to be able to brew. So so the land, it's like anything. It's like your lawn; it needs cutting. So you need something to cut it, and that's when we got the cows in there, because they're relatively easy maintenance, but they keep everything neat and tidy.
Yeah, fair play. So how challenging is it then, whether not for yourself but for the fellows around you? How challenging is the farming industry then at the moment? Because we see Jeremy Clarkson waxing lyrical about it a lot on the television. Just how difficult is it?
I think it's very difficult. I think if I'm classified as a small farmer, I think it's a dying breed. They're not going to be around. It's impossible to generate unless you can diversify and have other things on. the farm. We were very fortunate that when we stopped farming, we went into self-storage and rented some buildings out, which at the time the government wanted. They were promoting, saying, all farmers need to diversify, and it always amuses me when I watch Clarkson Farm. It's with the restaurant. Is how much the low. I hope hopefully there are no councillors listening at the moment. But they were so against him, and they were against us, and it was only the committee members that in the end that voted it through to get change of use.
Wow.
And they didn't want it. They didn't. They wasn't like saying what a fantastic idea. And then I think that's going to be the struggle with, you hear with the government saying we're going to develop X, Y, and Z, we're going to build all this. I think the local councils don't want it, and we're in an area that I think they're saying there are a third less houses than they're recommended as an annual build.
Yeah.
So there's going to be some dramatic changes, and that's sort of probably on the one side of farming. The other side of farming, I think, we've got potential more grain coming in from America. The crops aren't going to be great this year with that, with the grass growth or the crop growth with the lack of rain. So I think it's I wonder what wouldn't do any good for my stress being a farmer at the moment. I think it's the bigger boys can always cope because there's an element of the cash flow. With the small farm, there's no cash flow because you've got to spend it on your groceries or your fuel or whatever you need to do.
Yeah, I think that's the thing with Clarkson. Love him or hate him, he's shown a light on an industry that probably, where we are, in Cheshire, there's farms all around us, but yeah, and I guess from my childhood looking at them now, and you can see them being repurposed. A lot of them, I'll take my kids to go and see the animals on there, or they're doing different things on it, and it's fantastic for them to go and see. But I guess it's unfortunate that it's become a needs must situation that they've had to do that to survive. And I think, like I say, some people aren't Clarkson's biggest fan. I quite like the fella. And
no, I think he's done an awful lot for the industry, more so than probably any other personality involved in farming. But I think the other thing over the years, farmers have had to change because the generations ago is when farmers didn't want anybody on the land. Now they're saying we need people on the land for the diversification. So everybody's had to be more agreeable and acceptable of what it's not us and them, it's everybody together. We're all in the same position. So he just shows that. He said he knows he needs people to buy product from him, otherwise he's not going to get it from the local market or the cattle market, because he won't get the price he needs for the animals that he's breeding or the crops that he's growing.
And he's pinched your idea as well with his Hawkstone as well. You know what I mean? He's
it's when I lost a bit of weight. I think I did look like him a bit before, but
well, I must admit, when you first came on, I wasn't convinced you were.
Just getting back to obviously the sort of the brewing and stuff. How long would it take from concept to the process to effectively the bottling up? So just talk us through sort of that almost that time frame in terms of when you first meet and sort of develop an idea for whether it's a new line or a new beer, and that process of actually how long does that take to then come to fruition?
So I think you can get a recipe now, and I think with the hops, it's like cooking. You'd never really know exactly what's going to come out, but you've got a good idea. If you put some saffron in, you're going to get that flavor. If you put mustard in, you're going to get that. So with the hops, the description of hops and the sort of, they do it's almost, I don't know what, it's not a diagram, but it's a diagram of what it will give you as far as bitterness and flavors. So you get a good idea, and you just need to build a bit of balance. So you need to sort of You don't want all the bitterness at the front and nothing at the back end. You want a bit of
Yeah.
sweetness. So that's where you sort of need. You might need to tweak it. You might get it right the first time. You might not. So that's sort of, and there are programs out there, so you can create the recipe for the volume of your brewery. The biggest thing we found is when we went from a relatively small bit of equipment to a medium bit of equipment,
Yeah.
you can't scale it up all together. So the hops act very differently. You can scale the malt up because you know that 1 kilo of malt will give you, as long as if it was within, not
Yeah.
exactly, but it will give you X amount of percentage of alcohol. But with the hops, our beers were so different to what we'd originally, the smaller batch beers, so we had to tweak those. So once you've sort of worked that bit out, the brewing process from sort of getting the malt and then everything being into the fermenter is a day.
Yeah.
So you're ready, everything's ready to go after sort of your 8-hour, 9-hour day, depending how well it goes.
Yeah.
Then the fermentation almost starts, it will start overnight. So the following morning you'll come back and everything's bubbling away nicely. That, depending on temperature, you can control that. And this is where we probably learned a bit over the years. If you ferment too high a temperature, you get off alcohols. So I always, I had a few beers and my head was thumping the next day. I'm thinking I only had 2 beers, but I've created something that's a real monster, and everybody's going, bloody hell, I've got a massive headache every time I have a beer. And we noticed that we were fermenting at 24, 25 degrees. And so all these off alcohols obviously affect your hangover. So we dropped
Right.
that back to 20, 21. And our beers, no, I'm sure that everybody gets hangovers, but it just cut it out. So there's little bits of process that you can, if you try and speed it up, then you're going to create something you probably don't want in a
Yeah.
flavour. So maybe a week, 10 days will be the fermenting process. We'll then, if we dry hop beer, then we'll put the dry hops in just towards the end. And that will then spend another, say, 24 hours, which will then, so we'll chill it, so we get all of the yeast will drop out, and we get our beer as clear as we can before we either send it off to be bottled or we package it into casks.
All right.
Oh, fair play.
So
Fair
in real terms, then you want to condition it as well. So a 3-week if the quickest we get beer back in a drinkable condition is 3 weeks, I think.
Right. Okay.
There you go. 'Cause, I mean, it's clearly a labour of love for yourself as well. So you saying at the start then, just how involved are you now in the brewing process, or is it just in the design phase, or do you have people who do it for you now for the most part?
Yeah, so Ross, he's sort of main brewer, so he's doing, because of I'm sort of part delivery man sometimes, part a maintenance man, part office, and if you're trying to do it with all of these distractions going on, you can't.
Yeah.
So we've got 1.5 in the brewery, half a part-time delivering, and then a couple of people in the office and a couple of people on the road but selling, sort of, well, 1.5 really, one part-time, one full-time. So it's grown to a bit of, it's not just a one-man band anymore. And the other one, I think it's very difficult for, as you're starting up, to become a one-man band and try and do everything is, and I know a lot of breweries have stopped because it's too time consuming.
Yeah, I can imagine. So what I should have mentioned as well when we had the last beer was, one thing I do on this podcast is I have a different beer every single week, sometimes more than one. And that last beer that I had was the 400th different beer.
Is
that I've
that
had.
right?
Yeah, the 400th different one on the podcast. So it's
Wow.
a nice milestone to mark this episode with.
Yeah.
We moved on now to the Grazing Girls. Do you want to tell us a little bit about this one? Because I tell you what, this is another enjoyable beer.
Yeah, so Grazing Girls, so it's mosaic hops. It's got a bit of sort of sweetness to it. Still that sort of mid fours, so it's nothing too strong. And I think this is probably, especially in cask, our bestseller. This goes to it's a happy medium. It's not say it's got flavour, but it's not crazy, so it can go into most pubs and venues, and everybody be sort of happy to drink it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it strikes me, as you just said there, this is not being dished, but like a very nice, what you say, it's quite strong, but like a middle of the road. It's still very drinkable. It's still quite fresh. It's not too heavy. But for 4.5%, it will probably sit maybe towards the higher mid to high end of what you would expect in a pub, I suppose. You might get the odd one that's a little bit higher, but 4.5 is relatively high.
Yeah, I think it seems to be higher now, though. I think ideally 4%, but the number of people that want they want 5%, but then all the duty starts going through the roof. So
Yeah.
we've tried to control our range, but the demand is for higher ABVs, and it's not my thing. I think that having a drinking 5% beer every time. This is where the sort of the 3.8 worked in really well with rugby clubs. It, I'm not promoting drinks, but if you have two, you're more likely to be okay. If you have two 4.5%, who knows what you were gonna,
Yeah.
what was going to happen. So I think
Yeah.
it sort of works that you're able to have a few. But you need the alcohol. That's the biggest challenge. You need the alcohol to transfer that flavour.
Yeah. I know you just said there, if you have a couple, and God help us when we go out, we're drinking 6.5, 7, 8%. It's like, that always doesn't end well.
It barely ends.
But I think there's some. Some of the sort of I don't probably buy as many beers now as I used to. I think it was always sort of, you're probably in the world now of you're trying your beers for the podcast, where I was when I was starting up, I was buying every different beer known I could get my hand on, and I just don't drink as many beers now. So when I want a beer, then it's got to be good.
Yeah. And
and
I think
I,
there's something in that. Yeah.
And I don't. I'm not. I wouldn't say. I mean, I tried some small beer the other day at 2.5, and it's amazing for the for that sort of the flavour that comes out. In a way, I think if I'm going to have a beer, I'm going to have a beer. What's the point in having a 2%? I prefer almost to go alcohol free,
Yeah.
but and that's sort of I don't feel I'm going to go down that route at the moment. I don't think we either need to, or it's our bag. When I think we're known for that mid range, and that's probably for for the definite short term we're able to stay.
Fair play. Have you looked at all then at the real no and low market, and maybe doing a no alcohol version of any of your beers?
Yeah, and I have, and there are various ways of doing it, and the difficulty is now we're sort of 2,000 litre, we're a 10-barrel brew, so it's an awful lot of beer to throw away if it doesn't taste well. And what do you do if you don't like it? Do you still sell it? I can't. This is why I've got all these cans of the other stuff, because I couldn't bring myself to sell it. Some people say, "Well, that's fantastic craft beer," but it might have been that's what exactly certain customer wanted, but I couldn't bring myself to put it on the market and say I'm happy with it, and that's but at the end of the day, you've got to be.
Well, that's true. Yeah, it's your brand, isn't it? And you live and die by it. I guess you can't just turn out any stuff and not be popular, because it's damaging. It is damaging.
It is, but I can't remember the phrase, but what one man's poison is another man's something.
Yeah,
But
no.
what I might like, me and Adam, we both quite like Adam, probably slightly stronger beers than me, but we have very different tastes. I can't stand sours. Yeah, Adam loves sours. And so when we go out, Adam will pick up I don't know, 7.5%, 8% sour or whatever, and I'll be like, I actually genuinely rather shave my own eyeballs and drink that sort of thing. So yeah, and it's strange because like you do have different tastes to it, and I absolutely understand that you want to put your name to it, and you wouldn't necessarily want to put something out there that is substandard. But actually, there might be people out there that for your substandard, they go, no, this is absolutely banging, and I want more of it type thing. So
Yeah.
I suppose there
But I
is that.
think that's the market, because that you would then have to almost change your market. This is why we
Yeah,
got into the can market, because we, the younger audience, the sort of the craft can shop, but it detracts from what we're trying to do mainstream, and that's the difficulty. I mean, sours are very different because depending on how you sour them, you don't. If you have a wild yeast in there, you're going to destroy the whole brewery. I mean, it's so you've got to you've got to know a bit about what you want from it and what you want, which direction you want to go in. Rather, otherwise, I think I'd feel that we're everywhere. And when we started to do this, I was very eclectic in my brewing. I sort of, I wouldn't brew the same thing over and over again. I just keep brewing something different.
yeah,
But you don't know if you're getting any better.
yes, yeah,
You need it. You need that sort of level, and to say, well, that's where I am there. Tomorrow's brew or next week's brew is either going to be better or worse. Why is it different? And we were tweaking temperatures. We were doing all sorts to try and get it to the way we wanted it to taste.
yeah.
And by brewing a new type of beer, we'd have to do that over, all again. And
So in terms of then when you said like to get it to the way that we wanted it, I'm just curious, how do you apply for the job of beer taster? Because
You put yourself forward.
sign me up. Well,
yeah, that's what you did. That's what I sent out.
absolutely. But so
and it is, you've got to, and you've got to, you've got to accept what people's opinion are. It's. I think most people know if a beer's been brewed well or badly. I think that's sort of, but they don't always balance, and there are off flavors, and I'm very fortunate with my brewer that his taste is unbelievable. He's I think it's hereditary, so he can taste off flavors way more than I can, and so he'll pick things out. If we've got any infection, he knows it before and you need that, because what you don't want to be doing, you don't want to be, the infection only is going to get worse. And we've had, in the past, we had our heat exchanger, there must have been a blockage in there, and we had a batch of bottles that, cans, in fact, they were exploding. They're hazy. We had a real issue with them,
right,
and we've got to the bottom of it. But it's that you taste it before, and in hindsight, we knew, and we thought, oh, it'll be fine, it'll go off, and obviously it wasn't. So we not only had the expense of brewing, but we also had the expense of canning, which so now we're sort of we test, we send it away to labs to make sure that we haven't got the infections fairly regularly. We're more methodical than we ever were before in cleaning, and in our regime of a very strict timing, temperature, everything. And then that it takes away some of the enjoyment, because it used to be, I used to get into the mash tun, dig it out, and you were sweating, but you still, well, we've got a slightly better mash tun, so it almost does it itself now. But but that was part of the organic bit of brewing I loved. You go, like I went to a gin school, and they just, apart from a big explosion, there's nothing else exciting that goes on. You just tip your stuff in, you come out with a lovely taste. But I wanted to get in there and do some work, and I wanted to. I'm a farmer. I wanted to feel like I've had my day's work. So, and that's what brewing to me is about.
You mentioned gin there, and that's interesting, because there is a proliferation now of gin companies springing up everywhere. Is that something you've looked at branching out into at all? Or are you happy?
Yeah, we did. And we got the sort of, we were going to call it Grazing Girls Gin, so we thought we got the sort of the branding, we do sort of quite a few shows, And bizarrely, I think women buy more beer at shows than men do. And I think whether it's because they feel guilty that they've left their partners at home doing the gardening, and we've gone to a nice show for a food show, so they'll go and bring them back a beer. And we thought, well, with that, they'll buy a bottle of gin as well. But again, it's a different market. We'd have to sort of lose focus on what we're trying to do, and we wouldn't
Yeah.
have done it in house. If you make the base spirit yourself, it's too expensive for gin. So and there's I think there's a lot of people out there just making a, whether it be good or bad, it's making that gin. And would ours be any different to anybody? We thought about putting hops in, but the flavour, you don't get the hoppy flavour that you do in a beer when you put it into a gin.
There you go. Right, I'll be interested.
You like a gin, don't you?
I love a gin, and then you.
No, I never did it.
Yeah,
I think a nice, but this is a nice sort of grapefruit sort of. That it's my go-to, but just trying to. I think I thought a bit like having a pub. I think I prefer being on this side of the counter to the other side. I like doing events, but I couldn't do it week in, week out because.
Yeah.
No, I mean I do love it, and the idea of putting hops in a gin, I like the sound of that as well. Somebody needs to do that. There must be a way.
There's that we say that we did the Malvern show, which is a local show to us.
Yeah,
and I'm not sure if they were from Bath or they were somewhere south, but fairly local. And they were telling me that the issues is initially they put too much in, and it wasn't a nice, even the sort of the citrusy flavors, it doesn't come out. And if you actually eat a hop, they're not nice. It's sort of a pelleted hop. They're not like eating a bit of stone fruit or something that you can get some lovely flavor out of. Then it's to break down the phenols, everything about the hop. It's a chemistry rather than just extracting a flavor.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it would be remiss of us, since we've had Tim on the episode so recently, to not ask you about your branding and how you come up with that, because there's a theme across it, and I like it. You know what beer you're looking at. You know it's one of yours the second you see it.
Yeah, so we've changed our branding. From my daughter does the branding, so she's a graphic designer. So we started with some. Don't even know how they were probably more of a wavy pattern than I always like this sort of this harbour beer. I always like that sort of two-tone can. I think it stands out. But we decided on a simpler label because we believed that our beers were crisp and clean, and that's what the image we want to put across in. Our sort of the hazy one's a bit more psychedelic, it's a bit more wacky because that's what it is. So we have with the Golden Fleece, we've tried to sort of make it a little bit different because it's a stronger beer. We just thought it needs to go along with this the same modelling as what the rest of them, but with a bit of a twist. And originally we had that into a can. We put our lager into a can, but just felt a 330 bottle was probably the sort of the restaurant trade. It was sort of a lot of people don't like drinking from cans in restaurants.
No, yeah, I think you're right there. I think it does. I thought when I unpacked them all, that one as well as the Pale Ale really jumped out at me because it just looks right in that. And in the color of the label as well. I think it looks fantastic. It looks really crisp, and as Gaz says, it's a cracker, isn't it?
Yeah, it's an absolute beauty, this one. I'll be honest, it's I did quite like the Greenfields, but this is my favorite one so far. This is right up my street, as they say. It's because it reminds me of, I'm trying to think, is it the Witchwood Brewing? They do like a gold, is it like a gold ale or an amber ale? I think it's a gold ale, and it reminds me a little bit of that, but it's an absolute beauty.
It's got that sort of malty. I call it a sort of a beer drinker's lager.
Yes.
it's sort of got a bit of maltiness, got the sweetness there. Um, I'm not a massive sort of lager drinker, but I think it's sort of it's this sort of step down from a pale ale to a lager. It's that in between almost.
Yeah.
And
It's a
we
good.
do
It
this
is very good.
at various festivals. We don't sell an awful lot into pubs with it. We've got a few regulars that buy it, but when we do festivals, it absolutely flies out because it's very Moorish.
It is very Moorish. Yeah, it is very, very Moorish. So, what? Tell us about the name of it then. Golden Fleece.
Again, it almost the more beers you make, the harder it becomes to try and think of a new name. So we tried to sort of be a bit farming related. We wanted it gold, and we wanted something just a bit different. So yeah, it is. It's almost we have a sort of a family. My son's very good at coming up with the names. He's not really good at the drawing and the design bit, but he's very good at coming up with names. So it's a good family effort.
And it's good. It's good that your family are all involved in it as well. That it's a family
Yeah, I
business.
mean they don't directly work for us, but we're on the farm. So apart from my daughter who's in London, we're all here. So if something needs doing, it's the typical phone up and saying the cows are out or some beer needs
We've
delivering.
lost one.
Yeah.
There's one estate. He's
Well,
running down
you
the
say
road.
over the years, that was sort of most people knew us because they'd see a cow on the road. So it was, and when you're at 5 o'clock in the morning, you've got a cow with horns that 3 foot long. It's quite scary.
Yeah, I can imagine. You know, driving down a country lane, turn a corner, and
Yeah.
there's a big
Yeah.
island. In front of you.
So while we're on the subject of names, then is it Brew 61 or Brew 61? Which one is it, and where did the name?
Yeah, Brew
come
61. So again, we're all very simple. Our postcode is B61.
Okay.
So it was just something we we didn't know. We were going to call it the Grove, but it was just a name that came up, and I suppose everybody sort of liked it, nobody disliked it. So it was nice and simple.
It's
No,
good. It's a good name, to be honest with you. You know, because it leaves you guessing. If you don't know the postcode, which I didn't know the postcode, and even if I did know the postcode, I'm not necessarily sure I would have made that association.
Yeah.
But no, it's a good name, and like you say, you know what I mean. I thought maybe it might be something like how many iterations you went through before you made your first beer that you were happy with.
Yeah. Well, the old my dad used to drink Brew 11, so I did the Shirley Beer Festival. They said, "What was your first beer?" And it was Brew 11, so it did sort of
Yeah.
follow on from there.
Fantastic. This one, I have to say, I'm not much of a lager drinker. As I said, I like my more peculiar beers, but this is an absolute beauty. And I will say this about all your beers that we've tried so far, and I'm pretty sure we can squeak another one in before the episode.
No, I'm sure we can try another one. Yes.
These are very, very nicely balanced beers as well, which is something that you clearly thought about and crafted. Can you give us any clues or any hints of what you're working on, any projects at the moment, or any ideas of what you want to do going forward?
We're looking. We've got a sort of a local homebrew group, so we're just talking to them. They brew some sort of slightly more unusual beers, so it's a sort of a good way for us to do something a bit more unusual. So yeah, we'll do that. I think probably the back end. It's sort of maybe for something for sort of the winter time, maybe sort of some winter brew. We have done collabs before. We did another one with a local brewery, Bewdley. They did a porter. So they don't always work for the sort of trying to divide the beers up and for paying the tax bill and all the rest of it. So it isn't the simplest thing to do. But it sounded very interesting. The chap who helps us out, he's part of this group, so he just sort of came in one day. So yeah, I think it's just getting out there to the market. We want to ideally be more local. I think we're in a tricky world of pubs that are tied, and so we've got to so you've got to go through, you've got to get into the either accreditation to get through the door in the big ones. So sort of
Yeah.
we're working hard with that.
So
But
how
all of
many?
this stuff,
Sorry, how many sort of pubs are you in then? Sorry for cutting you. So locally, sort of, well, what is your
well,
footprint?
on our books as such, we've dealt with about 350.
Right.
So, but regularly, I mean we sort of tend to be probably more guests. So we've got it might, 15 to 20 regular ones, and
Yeah.
then we're on a rotation with other breweries. We've got actually with sometimes it's good and bad. We do. I think we've got 68 Witherspoons that we're dealing with as well at the moment, which is is good for cash flow, but not very good for profit. But
No.
they're fantastic to deal with. They look after the beer. It gets our beers out there to people, and you rarely hear of a bad story.
I mean,
That's good.
just that golden fleece. If I walked in somewhere and saw that on, and I was like, right, I'll have one. Thank you very much. I would be absolutely over the moon with that. I think it's a belter of a beer. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, and for us, it's probably the worst one to get out there, because we condition it for a month in the tank. So we brew it for your sort of 3 weeks, then we'll condition it for a month. So we don't want to sell too much of it because it would block up all the tanks, and we
Yes.
wouldn't be brewing anything else. So, but when we do a festival, we need to have a lager, and
Yes.
and that it's so I think it just fills the spot, and we do a say and I think the lager drinkers are very traditional. They will stay to their brand. They are brand loyal, where an ale drinker is more fluid.
Yes.
I think he gets out there and tries every different beer, or 400
Absolutely.
obviously. So I don't know if there are 400 lagers for you to try, but
Possibly not. No,
yeah.
possibly not. Interesting though, when we had Tim Weaver on, that's one of the things that we looked at was brand loyalty, and it's very, very difficult to buy in. So that selling local is fantastic. If you can get people who are bought into your brand locally and want to support local, that's fantastic. And I think you do need that. And also, like you say, although they might not bring in a huge amount of profit when they're sold in such large margins, if you go into one of these Wetherspoons pubs and you see your beers in there, and then you go elsewhere, it's a great advert. They can pick it up there, and they'll pick it up hopefully elsewhere. And like you say, are you getting them into many of the shops? Is there any challenges of getting them into supermarkets? Maybe
The supermarkets are slightly. We do sort of more garden centre, farm shop. The supermarkets would have to go. We've just got an accreditation. I can't even remember what it's called now. They was just come through, but we'd need salsa. So that's the next step to do. But if we wanted to go down the supermarket route, and also if we were going into the large chains as well.
Yeah.
So it's another sort of box ticking exercise that we will have to do eventually. But as with growth, you just got to do one step at a time.
Yeah. And I was going to ask about that really, in terms of, you mentioned the scalability. How much produce do you produce, and is that, in terms of getting into like the supermarkets, is there like a minimum? Would there be a minimum requirement effectively to get into
Yeah,
these?
we did slightly had it was a very vague conversation with one of the bigger ones,
Yeah.
and it got to the point where we would have to outsource the brew, and we couldn't have done it in house.
Right. Okay.
And that you then start saying, well, what are you doing it for?
Yeah.
I think we'd almost end, if you wanted to do it, it'd have to change the brand and say that's the beer that's going to go there. We will still
Yes.
stay, relatively small, and keep our sort of ethos the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know certainly I used to work in retail, and places like the Co-op, they're sort of charged with shopping locally as well, and they try and get some local brews in there. So while they're not having the membership details stolen, it might be it might be something that's worth looking at. Sorry, Corp.
Yeah, we have talked because a lot of they go through a local sort of buying wholesaler. So we are talking, but it's a tough world to get out there. Everybody wants to be in that world. So, well, not everybody, but a lot of people want to be in that world. So, and we're still relatively unknown. We'll go to events 5 miles away, and people won't have heard of us.
Right.
So, and that's the sort of to spread the word is it's a slow thing, and it is a bit of a snowball once it starts to work. People do hear, and the following year you go back to an event and they'll come back and say hi and blah blah blah. So it's not but it doesn't happen overnight, and so
No.
and I think with our growth, if we put all our eggs in one basket and went to one supermarket, we probably wouldn't be able to supply a lot of the small shops then. So we've just got to be a little bit careful, which direction we want to go in.
And you mentioned that it's not an overnight thing. So how long have you been doing it then? So is it like a 10 years, 15 years?
It's always been 5 years, but I think every year is 5 years. So I think I started home brewing probably 5 or 6 years ago, and then we've only started employing people to rather than just do it myself in the last sort of 3 or 4 years.
Wow, really?
So,
okay, so quite new then,
yeah.
relatively.
So it's sort of. I mean, I'm impatient, so I always want it to be quicker than it is. But when I look at what we're sort of sending out today, or with these sort of weeks now, I mean, poor old Ross, he's flat out. He can't, he can't do anymore. So it's a better, and that's sort of the hardest bit. It's working out when that demand's going to come through the door. You get a wholesale order, and they want 2 or 3 pallets. Now, so an 18. So our total brew is 45 barrels.
Right.
So you get an order that's wiped out one brew. Who's not going to have it? So we sort of, that's why we've reduced down our core range rather than sort of 9 or 10. Our core range will always have in stock to 4, so that we know that if you want a specialty or a seasonal, it will be as and when it's ready.
So at what point then? And I suppose the question is, where can you see this? So at what point are you happy with what you've got, or is there that $64,000 question, which is, well, actually, do we get a second lockup warehouse brewery? Do we employ more? Is there a scalability?
Yeah.
How do we do that? And where do you think that will be on your journey, if that's even where you want to go with it?
Yeah, it's an interesting, because I think and I've with other brewers, I don't know, but we found that it's consumer led in a way. So we're sort of we can certain times of the year we can sell it and everything will go out the door. Other times it won't. So that's when you start to rely on your locals or your local pubs to sort of, and if they're not busy, they haven't been busy. It's a tough world in the pub world. So you can go to, a pub now with a garden might be full, but the winter one it might not. So it's how do you work out when you start brewing 5 days a week, and when do you slow down to 1 or 2 days a week? And that's sort of the balance. You don't want at the end of the season, because January, Feb time will always be quiet. So you don't want your beers left over then. And we're learning that because we're growing every year. So you start, so do you add 10% on? Do you add 20% on a year?
Yeah.
And that's because you can take an order and all of a sudden it's blown last year's figures out the window, and then the following month it isn't there. So and that's sort of it's not like the housewife going to buy her, her cornflakes every week because that's what little Joey wants. The beer drinkers are, I suppose they might be a bit sort of as and when they're going to that pub, or that pub's
They're
I don't understand the marketing side of it.
very
Quite,
fickle beer drinkers,
yeah.
aren't they?
Yeah.
And I suppose a question for me is, and you mentioned there about you've got waves of demand or not demand. What sort of capacity have you got? Have you got enough capacity at the moment where you are to swallow up an increase in demand, or would you then have to start looking at maybe outsourcing it or buying another place for yourself?
Yeah, we've got. I mean, at the moment, we can probably add another third on. I
Right.
mean, we're going to be working. It's not like there might need to be another person racking, another person to sort of,
Yes. Yeah.
or just a few more. So the equipment that we bought can manage. It's just obviously it's just the process of because it's everything's manual. If you're filling a cask up, you've got to fill that cask and you've got to lift it, and if it's the last one on the rack, you've got to lift it up
Yeah.
5 foot high. So you come out, you come out exhausted. So you need more. You need manpower to help to make sure that they don't all keel over and or not turn up the following day.
Yeah. Work-life balance and all of that.
Yeah, and it is a manual job, and it's so you and it isn't a forgiving industry. If you don't feel well, if you've got the snivels or something, you've still got to come in. That it bit
Yeah.
like if it's coming out, it's coming out.
It sounds like an innuendo, that does.
It does,
But
yeah.
what I have to say is that you've kindly sent us 7 beers. We managed to get through 5 tonight. That's not too bad, is it?
No, that was okay. And from looking at obviously the literature and looking at what you sent us, the hazy was one that I was looking forward to. I'll be honest with you, because that absolutely is right up my street. And I know I mentioned that the Golden Fleece was a belter, but I could drink a truckload of this.
Yeah.
It's 5%, so for me, it's in that. What I suppose a slightly low, not really low end, but the lower end of beer. So I would
Yeah.
drink 5%,
Yeah.
6% maybe. But this is absolutely my wheelhouse, and I could quite easily drink that most of the night.
It's been our problem child.
Really,
Yeah. And
That's how we describe gas.
I was going to say I've been called worse.
So because it's because of the haze, as some of the production issues that we've had over the years with it got to the point it was almost we were not gonna make it anymore. So eventually we found somebody that will come to the brewery and can in the brewery. So we haven't got to worry about, well, we had oxidization issues because the filters were blocking up because of the protein haze. So they were then having to clean the filters, letting air into the system. So we had big issues, and I just said, I can't be dealing with it anymore. So we worked a way round of doing it in house. So now we carve up in the house, and then in the brewery, and then we automatically pump in. So we'll get a canner come in as and when we need them, and we can see we haven't got to take it off site, so everything's done in front of us, and it's taken out all of the risk, or as much of the risk as we before. But and also because of the issues we were having, we had to slightly tweak the recipe. And when you tweak a recipe, that because we didn't want the protein in there, so we were trying to take the haze out, or trying to take some of the haze out, and it wasn't giving the right product. So
Yes.
now we've been able to go back to our original recipe. It, to me, is how it should be. It's not overly sweet. It's got bitterness. It's got everything there. I mean, it's not the most. punchy and American-y hopped beer, but I say that we're the middle of the road brewers. We're not the extreme verdants. We're not the
Yeah.
sort of those way out, then anything goes type. People know. I think people, when they buy from us, they do know what they're going to get.
Oh, it's a gem.
But I do think it's, as you say, it's well balanced. It does what it says, and excuse me, but it does what it says on the can or tin. You know, it is a hazy ale. It's at 5%. It's punchy enough. It's that very drinkable, very pleasant. I would say sort of middle of the road hazy ale, and
Yeah.
you know, as I said, you know, I could happily sit in a boozer and drink that most of the night and be absolutely not disappointed with it at all in any way, shape, or form. So yeah, congratulations, because that one's a belter.
Great, thank you.
This will be my absolute go-to beer, absolute belter, as Gaz says. And like every problem child, they always say, don't give up on it. It's worthwhile. It is worthwhile.
They come good in the end.
They do come good in the end. I have to stop making jokes about my own kids. They're going to listen to this podcast one day and they're going to curse me. But no, honestly, this is a really, really good. I mean, they've all been very good beers, but this is the sort of beer that I would drink regularly. And yeah, this is an absolute gem. It's
a gem. And it would be very remiss of me on a beer podcast not to mention, and it's a bit of an in-joke, sort of Brewdog. We went through a phase a few years ago mentioning Brewdog, and we seem to mention them every single episode we were ever on. But you see, I would drink the hazy and the double and the triple hazy. So that, you know, the triple obviously is at 9.5%, something like that. Which obviously you can drink a couple and that's about it. You wouldn't drink it all night, but you know, you come back to I am a big hazy fan. And as I say, this is absolutely right up my wheelhouse.
But and I agree. I think hazies are lovely. I would if I saw it, I was anywhere, then I would choose a hazy as my my first beer. But it's still amazing how many people turn it up like the nose up, saying it's hazy.
Wow.
I think that will change. I think that will change going forward. I think beer drinkers is the sort of thing that they're after.
But I mean, I'm sort of talking at our friends in the spoons that maybe don't have as many hazies, and right, they're not craft bars, but it's almost we've had to, they have to be warned.
Right.
This is how it's going to look. Don't hand it back.
Yes. Oh, well, hold on. What does that? Well, that's not right. I can't see through it. What's going on?
I know. So we normally wrap these episodes up round about the hour mark, but before we go, Tim, we need you to be able to share out for us just where people can find you on social media and where people can find you online. We will, of course, put that information in our show notes as well, so that people can click on it and hopefully go and buy some of these beers, because I've got to tell you, absolutely fantastic. And before you give out that information, I have to say thank you, because you know, all those people who were kindly you sent out that beer to, well, we're a little bit more demanding than that. Not only did we ask for the beer, but we asked for a little bit of your time as well. So I know you're a very busy man, so I need to say thank you very much for giving up some time this evening for us.
No, I think it's always lovely to talk about. I'm still passionate, you know, and I think I've always will be passionate about something that. So it's lovely to talk about it. Nice to, you know. So it's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. So where can we find you online then?
So we're sort of www.brew61.co.uk. Our Instagram page is, as I'm a man of age, what's it? It's Brew61.
Brew_61, I think it is.
Brew under. That's even you know better than I do.
There you go. That's the one. Brew_61, guys.
And I think on TikTok, I'm the Beer Farm.
There you go.
So you can see me doing silly things on TikTok.
There you go. We need to get on TikTok, dude.
We do need. Well, do we? Because some of the things, I'm not sure that would end well. I'll be honest with you, but we'll wait and see. For 2 51-year-old gents, the thought of jumping onto social media is a little bit frightening to me, but we'll see where we go.
I'm 59, so you're spring chickens. You've got no excuse.
Oh, well, sold. Okay.
We are convinced. So, Tim, thank you very much for your time. like I say, we really, really appreciate it. But more importantly, thank you for sending this beer. It was a real, real treat for us. A real treat to be able to review it. And we've been honest with what we've said. This isn't. We're not paid for. We're not. If this isn't one of those paid promotions, if you're watching this, we've been given no money to tell you how good this beer is. It is absolutely fantastic. And there's 2 more in there. I might let Gas take one away with him tonight, or I might. No, I will. Of course, I will. Of course, will. But
So,
no,
remind me which ones you've got, because when you had yours, we're out of 2 at the moment. So, which ones have you got left?
I think we've got the Bramling Best and the Spring Meadow.
Right. Okay. So the Spring Meadow, because there was a BDA that we were out of as well. So that was a mild.
Yeah.
But the Spring Meadow now is the one that's coming back in. That's going to be the gluten-free one.
Cool. Well, ironically, that's the one I took the photograph of. So when the artwork it goes out for the audio episode, which will go out around about mid-June, I think the audio episode comes out. That's the picture of the bottle I've done on there that is taken out in a Spring Meadow. I thought it seemed the most appropriate place to do it.
Yeah.
And that's the one we haven't drank. Ironic.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just want to sort of echo what Adam said. Really, thank you very much for sending us the beers, giving us the opportunity to review them, and genuinely, out there in listener land, as Adam said, we're not paid to review them. We just give honest opinions, and genuinely and honestly, there isn't one there that I was disappointed with. Each of them have their own little subtle differences, and very, very, very easily drinkable. So Tim, I say massive thank you from me. I just wish you every success sort of moving forward, and I hope you go from strength to strength, and fingers crossed, who knows, maybe come on again and come back on in sort of 6-12 months time and let us know how your journey's continued
when we're in Waitrose.
Indeed, and we'll pay for the beer this time.
Lovely to speak to you both.
Cheers. Thanks, Tim. Thanks. Bye-bye.